The Buddha noticed how easily the mind is moved by the changing conditions of life. When life gives us what we want, we hold on. When it brings something painful, we push it away. And somewhere between the holding and the resisting, the mind becomes tired. But beneath all of this, rising and falling, a deeper steadiness can be found. Tonight, we're going to spend some time with a quality the Buddha returned to again and again: equanimity. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you're listening from. Equanimity is the ability to remain steady in the face of constant change, through the good days and the difficult ones, through praise and blame, success and disappointment, closeness and loss. Most of us are moved by these changes more than we realize. Equanimity offers another way. Not indifference, but a heart that can stay open and unshaken at the same time. Tonight, we will explore this through stories and teachings from Buddhism and Zen. There is nothing you need to fix, nothing you need to remember. Just relax and settle in. Thank you for joining us here at Midnight Monk. Let us begin. The Buddha taught that there are 4 ways of being he called the divine abodes. He gave them that name because a heart that learns to rest in them feels at home in a way it never does when it dwells in anger or in fear. The first is loving kindness, the simple wish that others be well. The second is compassion, the heart that turns toward those who suffer. The third is a glad joy that delights in the good fortune of others. And the fourth, the one we will rest with tonight, is equanimity, a mind that stays balanced no matter what arrives. It is placed last, and that placement means something. In this tradition, equanimity is often called the jewel that completes the other 3. Without it, love can tip over into worry. Care can wear itself down into exhaustion. With it, the heart can stay open and steady at the same time. And yet of the 4, equanimity is the one people misunderstand the most. When some people first hear the word, they pull back from it. They picture a person who has gone cold, someone calm only because they have stopped caring, a flat, grey sort of peace with the life drained out of it. And who would want that? Most of us would rather feel something, even something painful, than feel nothing at all. But that picture has it backwards. Buddhist teaching even has a name for the confusion. It calls indifference the near enemy of equanimity. A near enemy is the imposter that wears the face of the real thing while being its opposite. Indifference and equanimity can look alike from the outside. 2 people sitting calmly through a storm. Inside, they are opposites. Indifference is calm because the heart has shut its door. Equanimity is calm because the heart has grown wide enough to hold what is happening without being knocked over by it. The difference between them is love. Take the love out, and you have a cold, closed door. Leave the love in, and you have something warm, steady, and strong. There is a simple image for what equanimity feels like. Picture a wooden beam balanced perfectly across a stone, the way children balance a plank to sit on either end. When the weight is even, the beam rests level and still. It is not asleep. It is poised, ready, alive in its balance. But add a little too much weight to one side, and down it tips. The other end flies up. Our minds are like that beam all day long. A kind word lands on one side and we rise. A sharp word lands on the other and we drop. Something goes the way we wanted and we soar. Something goes wrong and we crash. back and forth, up and down, tipped by each thing that arrives. Equanimity is learning to rest more often at the center of the beam. Not because nothing lands on us. Things will always land. But because we stop being thrown so far by each one. We feel the weight, and we stay close to the middle, and we settle again more quickly. This is the steadiness we will explore tonight. Not a wall against life. A balance within it. Let us explore a story about a grandmother who lived long ago in a small house at the edge of a farming village. She shared the house with her daughter's husband, and a little boy of 3. The boy was the light of the household. He was also, as small boys are, a whirlwind. He climbed what should not be climbed. He ran where the ground was uneven. One afternoon he was chasing a chicken across the yard when he caught his foot on a root and tumbled to the ground. For a moment there was silence. Then he began to wail. The young mother came flying out of the house, her face gone pale. She scooped him up, turning him this way and that, her hands trembling. "Where does it hurt? Are you all right? Oh, look at you, we have to do something, we have to." Her words tumbled over one another. The grandmother set down the basket she was holding and walked over. She did not hurry. She knelt beside them, looked the boy over, and smiled at him. "Ah," she said, "a brave tumble. One of your finest yet." The boy stopped crying for a moment, surprised. The mother turned to her, almost upset. "How can you be so calm? He is hurt." "A little," the grandmother agreed. "He will be sore tonight, and tomorrow he will have a fine story to tell the other children." She brushed the dust softly from his knee. "I have dusted off a great many knees in my time. Yours among them." The mother blinked. "Mine? You came off the plum tree when you were 5. You took a spill by the well at 7. You wept as though the world were ending every single time." The grandmother smoothed the boy's hair. "And here you are, whole and grown, a mother yourself." The young mother felt something loosen in her chest. Her hands went still, and here was the strange part. As her own fear settled, the boy settled too. He had been watching her face the whole time, reading it to know how frightened he ought to be. When he found calm there instead of panic, he wriggled free, sniffed once, and toddled off to look for the chicken again. That evening, when the house was quiet, the mother spoke softly. "You love him as much as I do. I know you do. So how do you stay so steady?" The grandmother thought about it for a while. "Because I have watched what passes," she said. "And most things pass. The fall, the fever, the bad afternoon. I am not steady because I care less than you. I am steady because I have loved longer. Long enough to learn that love does not have to panic to be love. That is the heart of it. The grandmother is not cold. She is the very opposite of cold. Her calm is made of love that has watched many small storms come and go again. She has simply learned that her fear was never the thing helping the child. Her steadiness was. This is what the Buddha meant. Equanimity that comes from not caring is just numbness, wearing a peaceful face. The equanimity he praised is warm all the way through. It is what is left of love once the fear has been taken out of it. In the Buddha's discourses, a heart filled this way is described as boundless and immeasurable. holding no ill will toward anyone or anything. That is not the description of an empty mind. It is the description of a full one. A heart so wide that the small waves of the day can rise and fall inside it without ever tipping it over. There is a story of a young man who longed to learn the craft of pottery. He traveled a great distance to study with a potter said to be the finest in the region. When he arrived, he was puzzled. He had expected a great artist, full of fire and feeling. Instead, he found a quiet man with clay-dusted hands who worked slowly and said little. The young man thought, privately, that the potter seemed half asleep. Where was the passion? Where was the spark? He had come all this way for a sleepy old craftsman. He nearly turned around and left. But the road home was long, so he stayed. For a whole season, he learned to knead the clay and turn the wheel. And slowly he began to notice something about his own hands. When his mind was excited, when he was hungry to make something fine and impressive, his hands grew jumpy, and the clay wobbled and slumped into a heap. When he was frustrated, the same thing happened. The pot only rose true when his hands were steady and his breath was even. When he was neither grasping toward it nor pulling away from it. One morning the great kiln was opened after a long firing. Inside stood many pieces, a whole season of work. Some came out lovely, glazed and gleaming in the light. Others had cracked in the heat and were ruined. A wealthy traveler happened to be passing and caught sight of one of the finished bowls. He lifted it toward the sun and praised it without end. This is the work of a true master. I have seen the bowls of the great cities, and not one of them is finer than this. Your name should be known everywhere. You should be famous. The potter thanked him kindly and went back to sweeping the floor. The traveler, eager to buy the bowl, reached for it too quickly. It slipped from his fingers and broke on the stone floor. He was horrified and began to stammer apologies. The potter looked down at the pieces. "It was a good bowl," he said simply, and swept them up with the rest of the dust. That night the young man could hold his question no longer. A stranger told you that you were a master, that you should be famous across the land. You barely smiled. Then he shattered the finest bowl from the whole kiln, and you barely frowned. Do you feel nothing at all? Are you made of stone? The potter laughed, and it was a warm laugh, full of life. Made of stone? No. Sit down a moment. He rested a hand on the wheel. You spent this whole season fighting this wheel. Remember? When you wanted a fine pot too badly, your hands shook and the clay fell apart in front of you. When you grew angry at it, the same. The clay only rose for you when your hands held steady, leaning neither toward it nor away from it. The young man nodded slowly. He remembered it well. That is all I am doing, the potter went on. I have spent 40 years learning to keep my hands at that center. Do you imagine I would let a stranger's praise pull them one way and a broken bowl pull them the other? The praise was pleasant. The breaking was a small sorrow. Neither one is worth leaving my center for. And from that center, I can sit down tomorrow and make another bowl. The young man understood then that the potter's calm was not emptiness at all. It was the most alive thing in the room. It was the very thing that let the work flow through his hands. Both of them, the grandmother and the potter, circle the same truth. The balanced mind is not a dull mind. The word the Buddha used for equanimity was upekkha, and it comes from a root that means to look upon or to see. It is the steadiness of someone who sees a thing clearly and is not carried off by it. There is an image the Zen tradition returns to again and again. A pond at night. When the surface is stirred into ripples, the reflection of the moon scatters into 100 broken shards. But when the water grows still, the moon appears upon it whole and bright. The water does nothing to make the moon. It simply stops troubling itself, and the moon was there the whole time. Our minds are like that water. When we are churned up by wanting and worrying, we cannot see what is right in front of us. When the mind settles, the world shows itself plainly. This is why this tradition treats equanimity not as a turning away from life, but as a clearer way of facing it. The Buddha often compared such a heart to a lotus. The lotus grows up out of the mud at the bottom of the pond, yet when water falls upon its petals, it beads and rolls away, without ever soaking in. To live with equanimity is to be a little like that flower. We stand in the middle of all that comes, the praise and the blame, the gain and the loss, and we let it run off us, instead of seeping in and weighing us down. And from that steadiness, something opens that stays closed to a mind tipping wildly back and forth. We can see clearly. We can act with care. We can love the people in front of us without drowning in our fear for them. As the grandmother already understood, love does not have to lose its balance to be love. So here is something simple to carry with you, with no effort required. Tonight, instead of trying to build calm out of nothing, simply remember that you already know it. Look back across your day, not at the dramas, but at the small, steady moments. Standing in a doorway watching the light change, rinsing a cup, resting your hand on something warm. In those moments, your mind was already balanced, already at the center of the beam, even if you never gave it a name. Equanimity is not a stranger we have to summon from far away. It is a quiet old friend we already meet many times a day without noticing. The whole practice is simply learning to recognize its face, to feel the flavor of a balanced mind so that it grows more familiar and a little easier to return to. You are not forcing anything. You are only remembering a steadiness that was always yours. Let us settle here for a little while. Feel the breath as it comes and goes, with nothing about it to change. When you feel ready, we will go on together. Something as small as a single word can change the color of a whole day. A passing compliment, and we walk a little taller. A passing criticism, and the same bright afternoon turns heavy and gray. The Buddha noticed how easily we are moved like this, and he gave the forces that move us a name. He called them the worldly winds. There are 8 of them, blowing in 4 pairs. Gain and loss, pleasure and pain, a good name and a ruined one. And the pair that blows hardest of all, for most of us, praise and blame. All day long these winds rise and fall around us, and all day long they push the mind one way, then the other. Think of how a sudden piece of good fortune can light up an afternoon, and how losing something we had counted on can darken it just as fast. Think of the comfort of a warm meal and a soft seat, set against the irritation of being too hot, or too tired, or kept waiting far too long. Think of the glow of being well thought of, and the small ache of being overlooked or misjudged. Gain and loss, comfort and discomfort, honor and disregard. These are not rare events that visit us once in a while. They are the ordinary weather of being alive, arriving and departing many times before a single day is done. We understand the cold winds well enough. When someone criticizes us, or we fail at something we cared about, we feel the drop. What we notice less is that the warm winds move us just as much. Praise feels good, so we rarely think of it as a problem. Yet praise can lift us off our footing as surely as blame can knock us down. We swell a little. We start to lean on it, and anything we lean on can be taken away. So the question for tonight is not how to stop the winds. The winds will always blow. The question is how to keep our feet while they do. Picture a father and his young son who set out one morning to sell their donkey at the market in the next town. The road was long and dusty, and they walked along beside the animal, in no particular hurry. Before long they passed a group of travelers resting under a tree. One of them called out, laughing, "Look at those two, trudging along on foot when they have a perfectly good donkey to ride. What sense is in that?" The father thought this was fair. He lifted his son onto the donkey's back, and they carried on. A little further, they came upon some elders sitting by a wall. One of them frowned and said loudly, "There it is, the trouble with the young. A healthy boy riding in comfort while his poor father walks in the dust. No respect at all." The father felt the sting of it. He lifted the boy down and climbed up himself, and they carried on. Soon they passed a well where some women were drawing water. One of them clicked her tongue. Shame on him. A grown man riding at his ease while that little child stumbles along behind. What kind of father is that? The father did not know what to think now. So he reached down and pulled his son up to sit behind him, and the two of them rode together. They had not gone far when a farmer leaning on his gate shook his head at them. "Two of you on one small donkey. Have you no heart? The poor creature can barely carry you both." At this, the father stopped in the middle of the road. He helped his son down, and the two of them stood there in the dust, the donkey between them, and the father let out a long breath. "We walked," he said, "and they called us fools. You rode, and they scolded you. I rode, and they shamed me. We rode together, and they pitied the donkey. Whatever we do, someone finds fault with it." The boy looked up at him. "Then what should we do, father?" The father was quiet for a moment. Then something in his face eased, and he almost smiled. "We will do what seems right to us," he said, "and let the road say whatever it likes." And they walked on toward the market, the boy strolling at his side, the donkey ambling behind, and for the first time all morning the father felt light, because he had finally set down the heaviest thing he carried, which was the hope of pleasing everyone. There is a verse in the Dhammapada, the old collection of the Buddha's sayings, that names this plainly. People will blame the one who sits in silence. They will blame the one who talks too much. They will blame even the one who speaks just the right amount. There is no one anywhere who is never blamed. That is not a bitter thought. It is a freeing one. If some criticism is coming no matter what we do, then arranging our whole life around avoiding it is like trying to walk between the raindrops in a storm. We will never manage it, and we will wear ourselves out in the trying. The father on the road found his ease the moment he stopped reaching for the approval of every passing stranger. Imagine how much of our energy goes into that impossible task. We soften our words so no one takes offense. We hold back what we really think. We shape ourselves a little differently for each person we meet, hoping for a smile and dreading a frown. And still, at the end of all that effort, someone is displeased. The Buddha was not telling us to stop caring for others. He was pointing out that approval is a foundation that can never be finished, because it must be rebuilt from nothing with every new face that appears. Set that endless labor down, and a great tiredness lifts that we did not even know we had been carrying. And the same is true of the warm wind, the praise, though it is harder to see. When we hang our happiness on being liked, we hand the key to it over to whoever happens to be speaking. And other people's words never hold still. It is the same with success itself, which is praise's close cousin. A great success can lift us so high that we forget the ground is still down there waiting. We start to believe the height is who we are. And the higher we are carried, the longer and harder the fall when the wind shifts, as wind always does, in the end. The danger was never in succeeding. It is in leaning the whole weight of ourselves against a thing that was never made to hold still. Consider a young man who lived long ago, in a land where the surest road to honor ran through the great examinations. He studied for years by lamplight, and when at last the results were read aloud, his name stood near the very top. The town lifted him onto its shoulders. There were banners and feasts. Strangers bowed to him in the street. For days his name was on every tongue, and he drank it in like a man who had been thirsty his whole life. But something happened to him in all that praise. He began to wait for it. Each morning he rose hoping for more, and a day without a compliment felt flat and wrong. His happiness, which had once come from the work itself, now came only from what people said about the work. Then one evening, at a gathering of officials, a senior minister glanced at a page of his writing and said only, "Adequate. The brushwork is a little stiff." Nothing more. He turned and spoke to someone else. The young man could not sleep that night, nor the next. The praise of 1,000 people had become a kind of background hum he no longer heard, but these few cool words rang in his ears without stopping. He grew thin and restless. He stopped writing altogether, certain now that he was a fraud. What troubled him most was that he could not understand it. He had everything he had once dreamed of. The honor was real. The success was real. The praise of the whole town was real. And yet here he was, more miserable at the top than he had ever been as an unknown boy, bent over his practice sheets by lamplight. What he could not see was that the misery and the praise had arrived together, walking hand in hand. The very thing that had lifted him was the thing now dragging him down. He had not gained a joy and then lost it. He had taken hold of a wind, and the wind had simply done what wind does. In time, word reached the teacher who had taught him his first characters as a boy, a calligraphy master, back in his home village. The old man made the long journey to the city and found his former student sitting in the dark, miserable. He listened to the whole sad story. Then he said, "When the crowd was singing your praises, tell me, where did your happiness live?" The young man thought about it. "In what they said, I suppose. In their mouths, then. And mouths are restless things. They praise in the morning and complain by night. You built your house upon the tongues of others, and now you are surprised that it will not stand still." The teacher rolled out a fresh sheet of paper and set down a brush. "Write me one page. Not for the minister, not for the crowd. Write it the way you did when you were 8 years old and no one was watching, for no reason but the pleasure of a clean line. The young man took up the brush. His hand was unsteady at first, and the early strokes were poor, and he felt the old worry rising, the question of whether the line was good enough, whether anyone would approve. But the teacher said nothing. He only watched. And slowly, the young man stopped writing for the imagined eyes of the minister and the crowd, and began simply to write. The brush moved. The ink flowed onto the page. Somewhere in that single sheet he felt again the steadiness he had known long before any title, the plain satisfaction that rose from inside the work itself and asked nothing of anyone. It had been there the whole time, underneath all the noise. He had only stopped listening for it. The Buddha put this kind of steadiness into one of his most memorable images. As a great rock of solid stone is not stirred by the wind, he said, so the wise are not shaken by praise or by blame. The wind still blows against the rock. Nothing about the wind changes, but the rock does not go chasing after it, and it does not topple before it. It simply remains. He offered another picture too, a deep lake, clear and still, that does not turn muddy at the first disturbance. A shallow puddle is churned into mud by a single passing footstep. A deep lake receives that same step and stays clear, because there is so much more of it. The greater our depth, the less the small disturbances at the surface reach all the way down. This does not mean we stop feeling anything. A kind word is still pleasant. A harsh one still stings for a breath. Equanimity is not a wall that keeps the weather out. It is the steadiness that lets the weather move across us without deciding who we are. We can enjoy a compliment as we enjoy a warm afternoon, glad it has come, knowing it will move along, without leaning the whole weight of our happiness upon it. The scholar's mistake was not that he felt good when praised. It was that he handed himself over to the praise so completely that he had nothing left to stand on when it cooled. The father on the road found the other path. He kept his footing, did what seemed right to him, and let the opinions blow past. There is something useful hidden in this too. When we are not crushed by criticism, we can actually listen to it. A balanced mind can take an honest comment, keep whatever is true in it, and let the rest fall away, without the whole self leaping up to defend itself. And when praise arrives, we can enjoy it freely, precisely because we are not depending on it to survive. Balance does not drain the color out of life. It lets us meet the warm winds and the cold ones alike with open hands, taking from each what is real and clinging to none of it. There is no need to make any of this into a hard discipline. It is enough, now and then, simply to notice the winds as they move through a day. To catch the small lift when someone approves of us and the small sinking when someone does not, and to see how quickly the mind is ready to rise or fall on a few passing words. Just seeing it begins to loosen its hold. Once we recognize the wind as wind, we are a little less likely to be carried off by it. We can let a kind word warm us without needing to clutch at it, and let an unkind one pass without building a house inside it. It can help too, to remember that the people whose words move us are being blown about by their own winds. The one who speaks sharply to us this morning is carrying his own load of praise and blame, his own hopes and worries, most of it having nothing to do with us at all. His hard word may have far more to do with his own difficult morning than with anything we have done. When we see that, we can hold the comment more loosely. It becomes one more gust passing through, already on its way somewhere else. The weather of other people's opinions keeps changing, as it always has. We can let it change and keep our own center. Let us rest here a little while. Whatever has been lifting you up or pressing you down, you can let it blow on past now. When you feel ready, we will go on together. We have seen how the winds of praise and blame move us up and down. But there is a deeper question underneath all of it. Why does a word from a passing stranger have any power over us at all? A breeze cannot knock down a house that is anchored to the ground. So what is it in us that the wind catches hold of? The answer is small, and it hides in plain sight. We take things personally. When someone says the work was poor, we do not hear, the work was poor. We hear, I am poor. We take the comment, and we stamp our own name onto it, and now it is not a passing remark anymore. It is a verdict on who we are. This stamping is so quick and so familiar that we hardly notice we are doing it. A single word lands, and in less than a heartbeat, we have turned it into a statement about ourselves. The Buddha spoke of this habit often. So much of our suffering, he taught, grows from one small movement of the mind, the movement that looks at an experience and says, this is mine, this is what I am. Notice the difference it makes. When a storm knocks a branch from a tree, the tree is not insulted. It does not lie awake, wondering what the storm meant by it, or what the fallen branch says about its worth as a tree. The branch falls, and the tree goes on standing. But when a hard word falls on us, we rarely let it simply fall. We catch it, turn it over, ask what it means about us, and store it away to take out and examine again at midnight. The event itself may last only a moment. Our personal version of it can last for years. The Buddha returned to this point so often because he saw it as the very hinge of our suffering. Not the events themselves, which come and go as they please, but the grasping that says mine, me, I, wrapping a small self around each passing thing. Loosen that grip even a little, he taught, and a great deal of needless pain finds it has nowhere left to gather. There was once a woman known throughout her river town for a calm that nothing seemed to disturb. People would come simply to sit near her, as one sits beside a still pool on a hot day. One morning a merchant came storming into the marketplace looking for her. His own affairs had gone badly that week. A deal had collapsed, money had been lost, and his temper was running hot. He had heard people speak of this woman's unshakable calm, and somehow it needled him, for his own days held so little peace. So he came to find out whether that calm was real, or whether he could break it. He found her at her stall and let loose a flood of harsh words in front of everyone. He called her names. He blamed her for troubles she had no part in. He went on for a long while, his face red, his voice carrying across the square. The woman did not flinch. She did not argue, and she did not look away. She let him say everything he had come to say, and she watched him with the same steady kindness she watched everyone. When at last he ran out of breath and stood there panting, she spoke, and her voice was unhurried. "May I ask you something?" The merchant, thrown off, gave a stiff nod. "When you carry a gift to a friend's house," she said, "and you hold it out to them, and they will not take it, where does the gift go then?" He scowled. "It comes back home with me, of course. It is still mine." I bought it. Just so, she said. And the words you brought me this morning, all of them, I have not taken a single one. So I suppose they are still yours. You are welcome to carry them home. The square went quiet. The merchant opened his mouth, then closed it. The anger drained out of his face, because he understood. He had hurled all of it at her, and somehow none of it had landed, and now he was left holding every bit of it himself. He stood there a moment longer, then turned and walked away, carrying his gift back the way he had come. This is a teaching the Buddha gave in his own life. When a man came and abused him with harsh words, he was not troubled. He asked the man what becomes of a gift that is offered but refused, and the man admitted it returns to the one who brought it. Then the harsh words, the Buddha said, were the same. He had not accepted them, so they remained with the man who carried them. There is something almost startling in how simple this is. We tend to assume that an insult, once spoken, becomes ours automatically, that we have no say in the matter at all. But between the word arriving and the word wounding us, there is a small gap. And in that gap lives a choice we did not know we had. We can receive the word, take it in, let it become a part of us, or we can let it stay with the one who offered it. The woman at the market had simply learned to rest inside that gap, and from there, nothing thrown at her could find a place to land. It would be easy to think this is only about insults. But we take the warm words just as personally as the cold ones. When we are praised, we reach out and accept that too, and we fold it into our picture of ourselves. I am clever. I am admired. I am important. And now we have built something that has to be protected, a self-image standing on the shifting ground of what others think. That is the heavier cost of taking things personally. It is not only that an insult can wound us. It is that, bit by bit, we assemble a whole self out of borrowed opinions, and then we must spend our days defending it. And a self built from the opinions of others is a restless thing to own. It has to be fed. It needs the next compliment, the next sign of respect, the next small proof that it is what it believes itself to be. A single doubtful glance can shake it. We become watchful, forever scanning the faces around us for some sign of how we are doing, never quite able to rest. The more we have poured into the image, the more anxious we grow about keeping it upright. What once looked like a prize turns out to be a heavy and demanding thing to carry. The strange thing is how much that self keeps changing. A blemish on the face can ruin a week for a person of 15 who feels the whole world is staring. The same blemish, at 70, is barely worth a glance in the mirror. Nothing about the mark has changed. What changed is the self that once felt so threatened by it. We were sure, at 15, that this was simply who we were and how things would always feel. And then we quietly became someone for whom it no longer mattered at all. If the self we defend so fiercely can soften and shift like that across the years, perhaps it was never as solid as we believed. Perhaps it is less a fixed thing to be protected and more a passing weather of its own. We can watch the same thing happen over much shorter spans. Something a friend says at a gathering can feel, in the moment, like the most important fact in the world, worth turning over for the entire walk home. A year later, we cannot even call it to mind. The remark that seemed to define us so sharply simply faded, because the self it had threatened was already busy with other concerns. Over and over, what we were certain was solid ground reveals itself, in time, to have been a passing cloud. Imagine a traveler walking a long road across many years. He was a decent man in most ways, but he had one peculiar habit. Whenever someone spoke a harsh word to him, or wronged him, or wounded his pride, he would stoop down, pick up a stone from the roadside, and place it in the sack he carried on his back. "So that I never forget," he would say, "what was done to me." At first the sack was light and easy to carry, but the road was long, and people are people, and the stones kept coming. A cruel remark here, a small betrayal there, each one another stone. Year by year the sack grew heavier. The man began to walk slowly, bent forward under the weight, his eyes always on the ground, watching for the next stone to collect. He told himself he was being strong. He told himself that to forget a wrong would be to let it go unanswered, and so he guarded each one with care, as a man guards something precious. But here was the strange part. The people who had wronged him felt none of this. They had walked on with their lives long ago, most of them never giving him another thought. He alone carried the weight of their worst moments, and he carried it every single day, up every hill, into every night. One day another traveler fell into step beside him, walking the same road but moving freely, standing straight, unburdened. After a while the second traveler nodded at the great sack and asked what was inside. "Every wrong ever done to me," said the bent man, with a kind of grim pride. "Every insult, every slight. I carry them all, so none of them is ever forgotten." The other man walked in silence for a few steps. Then he asked, "These people who wronged you, the ones whose stones you carry, tell me, are they walking bent over too? Do they carry a sack like yours?" The bent man frowned. "No. Most of them have long forgotten they ever said a word to me." "So they walk free and light," said the traveler, "while you carry their stones up every hill for the rest of your life." Those words were theirs in the moment they spoke them. They only became yours when you bent down to pick them up, and only you can set them down again. The bent man stood there on the road for a long while. Then, slowly, he slipped the sack from his shoulders and let it rest in the grass. When he straightened up, he felt as though he might float away. He had been carrying other people's words for so long that he had forgotten what his own back felt like without them. This is the freedom that comes from no longer taking everything to heart. The words still get spoken. People will still praise us and blame us, as they always have. But we do not have to reach out and accept everyone, and we do not have to gather them into a sack and haul them through our lives. The Buddha described this with an image many people remember the moment they hear it. Picture a person who is struck by an arrow. That is painful, and there is no avoiding it. But then, he said, that same person reaches for a second arrow and drives it into the very same wound. The first arrow is the pain that life sends, the kind no one escapes. The second arrow is everything we pile on top of it, the resistance, the asking why this had to happen to me, the long story about what it all means. The first arrow we often cannot help. The second one, he taught, we fire into ourselves. Anyone who has sat with a difficult feeling has known this difference. There is the bare ache itself, and then there is the heavier thing we wrap around it, the part that calls it my pain, that insists it is happening to me, that it must say something about my whole life. The bare feeling is the first arrow. The wrapping is the second. And the wrapping is the part we can lay down. This is not a cold trick of pretending the feeling is not there. The feeling is fully felt. We only stop adding the second arrow, and what remains is simply an experience, moving through, like clouds crossing a sky that is not harmed by their passing. This is close to something the Buddha often asked of his students. He would point at each thing a person takes to be themselves, the body, the feelings, the good name, and invite them to look honestly and ask whether it could truly be called mine, truly be called what I am. We are not the praise we receive. We are not the blame. We are not even the proud picture of ourselves we have spent years assembling out of other people's glances. When we hold all of it more lightly, when we stop pressing mine onto every word that drifts past, the winds can still blow, but they pass through us now, instead of knocking us off our feet. Some people hear this and feel a small flicker of fear. If I am not my reputation, not my successes, not the picture others hold of me, then what am I? It can seem as though letting these things go would leave nothing at all behind. The Zen master Dogen touched this very worry when he wrote that to study the self is, in the end, to forget the self, and that this forgetting is not a loss but an opening. When we stop defending a fragile image, what is left is not emptiness. It is ease. We are still here, still ourselves, still able to love and work and laugh, only without the constant strain of guarding a self that was never as solid as it pretended to be. We give up nothing real. We give up only a weight. There is nothing to force here. It is enough to begin noticing the small moment when the mind reaches out to grab a comment and make it personal. Just seeing that reach, and now and then choosing not to follow it, is already a kind of release. In our daily lives, the chances to notice this are endless, because the words never stop. Someone speaks carelessly. Someone judges us unfairly. Someone praises us for a thing we are not even proud of. Each time, there is that small gap, that brief moment before we decide to make it ours. We will miss the gap far more often than we catch it, and that is perfectly all right. Even seeing it once in a while, even setting down a single stone out of many, lightens the load we carry. This is not a test to be passed. It is simply a kinder way to carry a life. Like the man on the road, we can leave the sack resting in the grass and walk on, lighter than we came. Let us be still for a breath or two. Feel how it is to let a thing land and not pick it up. When you are ready, we will carry on. The people we love can unsettle us in ways nothing else can. When someone dear to us is struggling or making choices we would never make for them, our own peace can vanish in a single breath. We lie awake at night. We carry their troubles through our days as though the troubles were our own. And we tell ourselves that this is simply what love asks of us. There is, though, another way to love. One that cares with the whole heart and still keeps its footing. The Buddha counted equanimity among the forms of love. He set it beside kindness and compassion as one of the 4 finest ways the heart can meet another person, and he taught that it was the one that completed the rest. Without some steadiness in us, our love tips over into worry, and our care wears itself down to exhaustion. With it, we can stay close to someone in trouble without being dragged under ourselves. The Chinese sage Mencius once told of a farmer who could not bear to wait. He had planted rice in the spring, and every day he walked out to his field to check on the young green shoots. They were growing, but far too slowly for his liking. "At this rate," he muttered, "the harvest will never come." He paced the edge of the field, fretting, willing the plants to hurry. One morning an idea seized him. If the shoots would not grow quickly enough on their own, then he would help them along. So he waded into the field, bent down, and began to pull each tender plant upward, just a little, to give it a head start. There were a great many plants, and the work took him the whole day under a hot sun. By evening his back ached, and his hands were caked with mud, but he was thoroughly pleased with himself. He went home and announced to his family, "I am worn out, but it was worth every bit of it. I spent the entire day helping our rice grow taller." His son, puzzled, ran out to the field to see this marvel for himself. He found every last plant wilting in the dusk, roots torn loose from the soil, leaves already curling inward. By trying to hurry their growing, the farmer had pulled them up out of the very earth that fed them, and now the whole crop was failing. We smile at the farmer, but most of us have done something close to it with the people we love. We see someone we care for growing slowly, struggling, not yet where we wish they were. And out of love, out of impatience, we reach in and begin to pull. We press our advice on them before they are ready to hear it. We try to force a change on our own schedule rather than theirs. We cannot understand why they will not simply do the thing that seems so obvious to us. But a person, much like a young plant, grows according to something inside them that our hands cannot reach. We can prepare good ground. We can offer water and light, our support, our patience, our own steady example. What we cannot do is pull someone up into blooming. When we try, we often harm the very thing we hope to help, and we wear ourselves out in the doing. The growing is theirs. Our part is to offer what we can, and then to let them be. This is one of the harder lessons of loving anyone. We want so badly to spare the people we love their struggles, to reach in and smooth the road, to simply hand them the wisdom we earned the hard way, so they will not have to earn it themselves. But wisdom does not pass from hand to hand like a coin. Each person has to grow their own, in their own time, often through the very struggles we wish we could lift from them. To stand back and let someone we love learn what only their own life can teach them is not neglect. It is a form of respect, and it asks more love of us, not less. In the old teaching on equanimity, there is a phrase that has been passed down for a very long time. Each person is the owner of their own actions. Their happiness and their sorrow grow, in the end, from what they themselves choose and do, far more than from anything we might wish for them. This is not said to make us cold or to push the people we love away. It is said to free us from a weight we were never able to carry in the first place, the impossible weight of being responsible for another person's happiness. We see this everywhere. A parent lies awake over a grown child's choices, feeling each of them as though it were happening to their own body. One friend takes on the heavy mood of another and carries it all the way home, unable to set it down. A husband or a wife tries, year after year, to mend something in their partner that only the partner can mend. In each case, the love is real and good. But somewhere inside it, an assumption has taken root. The assumption that to love someone is to become responsible for their happiness, to make it our personal task to secure. However tenderly it begins, that assumption slowly bends us under a load no person was built to carry. There were once two brothers who lived in the same town. The younger had fallen into low and heavy spirits. He had stopped caring for himself, kept poor company, and turned away from nearly everything that might have done him good. The elder brother loved him dearly, and it broke his heart to watch. He went to a healer known across the region for her wisdom, and he asked for help. She listened carefully, then gave him a remedy, along with clear guidance on how his brother should live in order to recover his health and his spirits. The elder brother carried it all home, full of hope, but his younger brother would not take the remedy. He would not follow a single one of the instructions. He thanked him, set the medicine aside, and carried on exactly as before. So the elder brother returned to the healer, distraught. "He will not take it," he said. "I have begged him. I have pleaded with him. I have done everything you told me, and he ignores all of it. Tell me what more I can do. There must be something. If he does not get well, the fault is mine. I am his brother. I am responsible for him." The healer regarded him with kindness. "Let me ask you something," she said. "When you brought the medicine home, did you carry it to him?" "Of course." "Did you hold the cup out to him?" "Yes." "Again and again." "Then you have done what was yours to do," she said. "You can carry the cup all the way to his lips. You cannot make him drink. I can prepare the finest remedy in the land, and you can offer it with every ounce of love in your heart, but the swallowing belongs to him alone. That part was never yours, and it never will be." The elder brother was silent. "But I love him," he said at last. "How can I simply stand by?" "I did not say to stand by," the healer answered. "And I did not say to stop loving him. I said only to stop trying to drink his medicine for him. Keep loving him. Keep the cup full and within his reach. Be there on the day he finally decides to lift it. But set down this idea that his whole life is yours to mend. That weight is crushing you, and it has never once helped him." The elder brother walked home that evening, feeling something he had not felt in a long while. He loved his brother no less than before, but he was no longer straining to carry a thing that could not be carried. And to his surprise, once that weight was set down, he found he could simply be near his brother again, warmly, without every meeting turning into a struggle between them. This is the surprising gift hidden inside letting go. We imagine that releasing our grip on someone must mean caring less, growing distant, giving up on them. The elder brother found the opposite. With the impossible burden gone, there was suddenly room again for ordinary affection, for ease, for being together with no quarrel waiting underneath. The love had been there the whole time, buried beneath the weight of responsibility. Setting the weight down did not bury the love. It set the love free. This is why the tradition says that equanimity completes love rather than cooling it. A love with no balance in it soon grows frantic. It clutches and controls. It reaches in to pull up the seedlings. It exhausts the one who loves and presses hard on the one who is loved. But a love with some steadiness underneath it can stay open and warm for a lifetime because it is not forever breaking itself against things it was never able to change. It is worth remembering that this steadiness is not a turning away. The healer never told the brother to care less. She told him to stop carrying what was never his to carry. There is a way of holding this balance that people have leaned on for a long time, spoken inwardly towards someone we love. I care for you with all my heart, and your happiness rests in your own hands, not in mine. However much I might wish things were otherwise, your life is yours to live. To hold both halves of that at once, the deep love and the letting go, is the whole art of it. In the Buddhist teaching, equanimity and compassion are said to walk together, each one keeping the other honest. Compassion without equanimity burns itself out, drowning in suffering it has no power to fix. Equanimity without compassion can drift off into not caring at all. But held together, the two become something rare. A heart that can stay wide open to another's pain, do everything within its power, and still rest, because it has made its peace with the limits of what one person can do for another. That is not a lesser love. It may be the deepest love we are capable of, the kind that can remain present for a whole lifetime without breaking. None of this asks us to grow distant or to stop offering help. It asks only that we offer it with open hands instead of clenched ones. There is even a hard irony in the clenching. The tighter we grip the people we love, steering them toward what we are sure is good for them, the more they tend to pull against us. A person who feels managed begins to resist, and before long they are wrestling with us, instead of with the choice in front of them. Loosening our hold is not only easier on us, very often it hands the other person the very room they needed to find their own way. In our own lives, we might begin to notice the small moments when love quietly turns into control. The urge to fix, to manage, to hurry someone along their path. We might feel the particular tightness that comes with it, the strange tiredness of trying to live two lives at the same time. And we might notice how it feels to loosen that grip, even a little. To do what is genuinely ours to do, with care, and then to allow the rest to unfold as it will. We do not have to pry our hands open all at once. It is often enough simply to see, in a given moment, that we are gripping, and to feel what the gripping is costing us. Frequently, that seeing alone is enough for the fingers to ease on their own. The people we love often find more room to grow when we finally stop pulling at them, and we have far more peace to offer them when we are no longer sinking beneath a weight that was never ours to lift. Let us linger here a moment. Set down, just for now, anything you have been carrying for someone else. When you are ready, we will go on. Underneath a great deal of our worry sits a mistaken belief. We rarely say it out loud, but we live by it all the same. The belief is that whatever we are feeling right now will last forever. When we are in pain, some part of us is certain the pain will never lift. When we are anxious, it feels as though the worry will simply go on and on. I will always feel this way, we think, even though we know, if we pause to consider it, that we have felt 100 other ways before this and will feel 100 more after. The mind, caught in a hard moment, forgets that moments move. We can catch this happening in the smallest things. A toothache convinces us, while it throbs, that we have always hurt and always will, and then it eases and we forget it within the hour. A sleepless night stretches out as though morning will never arrive. A wave of embarrassment feels, in the moment, as though everyone will remember it forever, though by next week, not a soul recalls it. Over and over, the feeling of the present paints itself across the past and the future, insisting it is the whole of reality, when it is only this passing moment wearing a very convincing disguise. The Buddha placed this single insight near the very center of everything he taught. Everything changes. Whatever arises also passes away. Nothing we can hold, no feeling, no situation, no season of a life, stays fixed for long. Whatever is subject to arising, he said, is also subject to ceasing. And seeing this clearly, really taking it into the bones, turns out to be one of the doorways to peace. Not because change is always welcome, but because so much of our suffering comes from expecting things to hold still, and being startled and wounded each time they refuse. He did not point this out to make life seem bleak. Quite the opposite. He saw that when we stop demanding that things stay the same, a long and tiring struggle falls away. We are no longer at war with the basic nature of existence. We can move with the current instead of fighting it, and in that agreement with how things actually are, rather than how we wish they would be, there is a peace that does not depend on anything holding still. An old story tells of an elderly man who lived beside a plum tree that blossomed once each spring. He loved that tree more than almost anything he owned. But over the years, his love had curdled into a kind of torment. Each spring, as the buds opened into white blossoms, he did not delight in them. Instead, he stood beneath the branches, already grieving. "In a few days, the wind will come," he would say, "and the petals will scatter, and all of this beauty will be gone." He spent the whole short blooming season mourning its end before it arrived. By the time the petals truly began to fall, he was too worn down by dread to feel much of anything. One spring, his young granddaughter came to stay with him. She had never seen the tree in full bloom, and when she stepped beneath it, she gasped with delight. She spent her days under the branches, looking up, and when the wind at last swept through and the petals began to loosen and drift down, she did not cry. She ran beneath them, with her arms thrown wide, trying to catch them as they fell, spinning and laughing at everyone that slipped through her fingers. The old man watched her, and something shifted in his chest. "Child," he said, "does it not make you sad that they are falling? In a day or two they will all be gone." She looked up at him, breathless and beaming. "But grandfather, they are the prettiest of all when they fall. If they never fell, I could not catch them." She opened her cupped hands, where a few soft petals lay, and if they stayed up there forever, we would stop noticing them. We only watch this closely because they are leaving. The old man stood very still for a long while. He had spent a lifetime so afraid of the petals falling that he had never once enjoyed them. And here was a small child who had found the falling itself to be the loveliest part of all. That spring, for the first time he could remember, he stood beneath his tree and simply watched the blossoms come down, and discovered, to his surprise, that what he felt was not sorrow but a tender and unexpected gladness. The Zen tradition has treasured exactly this for centuries. Each spring, people gather beneath the flowering trees, not in spite of the fact that the blossoms last only a handful of days, but because of it. The blossoms are precious precisely because they fall. Their brief life is what makes us set down whatever we are doing and look up. A flower made of stone, one that never faded, would soon become invisible to us, and we would walk past it without a second glance. It is the passing of a thing that makes it worth loving while it is here. The Zen monk Ikkyu, gazing up at falling blossoms, once observed that their color and their scent fall with them and are gone, and yet, heedless of all our grief, the spring comes again. There is the whole of it in a single breath. The blossoms do not last, and the spring returns. Both are true at once, and learning to hold both together is where much of our peace is found. How often we spoil a good moment by grasping at it. We are on a long-awaited journey and spend half of it fretting that it will end. We hold a sleeping child and ache already for the grown person they will become. We sit across from an old friend and, instead of being there, mourn the parting that is still hours away. The grasping mind cannot rest inside a joy because it is too busy trying to keep that joy from leaving. The child beneath the plum tree understood something her grandfather had forgotten. She did not try to hold the petals. She let them fall, caught what drifted into her hands, and laughed. So this truth, that everything passes, turns out to have two faces. One face asks us to hold the good things lightly, to enjoy them fully while they last, and to release them when their time has come, rather than clutching and souring the very sweetness we were given. But there is another face to it as well, and this one is a deep comfort when life turns hard. There is a story of a young man who came down to the edge of the sea in despair. Everything he had worked toward had fallen apart. His plans had failed, his hopes had come to nothing, and he was certain that the heavy grief pressing on his chest would remain there for the rest of his days. He sat down on the rocks and stared at the grey water, convinced he would never feel anything but this. An old fisherman was working nearby, mending his nets, and after a time, he spoke up. "You have the look of a man who believes today will last forever." The young man barely turned his head. "It will. Nothing is going to change for me now." The fisherman set down his net. "Come here a moment," he said. "Put your hand in the water." Too tired to argue, the young man crouched at the water's edge and let his hand sink into the sea. "Now," said the fisherman, "the water you are touching, is it the same water that was here a breath ago?" "No, I suppose not. It is moving. It keeps flowing past. Just so. It looks like the same sea. It has looked like the same sea every single day of my long life. And yet it is never once the same water. It is always arriving and always leaving, every moment, never resting." He nodded toward the young man's chest. "That sorrow you are carrying feels like a stone, a solid weight that will sit on you forever. But it is no stone. It is far more like this sea. It is moving even now, while you sit here naming it. It is already not quite the same sorrow it was this morning. Nothing that moves can stay. And feelings move, every last one of them, always." The young man looked down at the water slipping past his fingers, never the same twice, and for the first time in many days, something in him loosened. His troubles had not vanished, but the iron belief that they would last forever had loosened its hold, because he had felt, in that moving water, the plain truth that nothing holds still, not even sorrow. This is not a way of making pain disappear. The young man's losses were real, and they still ached. But there is a great difference between a pain we believe is permanent and the same pain seen as something passing through. The first sits on us like a life sentence. The second feels more like weather. The hurt may be just as sharp in the moment, and yet beneath it now runs a steadying current, the simple knowledge that this, like all things, is already on the move. When we truly take this in, it changes the way we move through both the bright days and the dark ones. We stop trying to freeze the good times in place, and so we become able to actually enjoy them. And we stop believing the hard times are permanent, and so we can pass through them with more grace. Anyone who has raised a child knows this truth in their body, even when they forget it in the moment. A small child moves into a difficult stretch, and the worn-out parent feels as though it will never end, as though the child will simply be this way always. Then, a week or a month later, it has passed, and some new phase has taken its place. There is real relief in learning to say, in the middle of a trying day, this is one of those days. Not this is how everything is now and always will be, but this is a passing weather and it will move along as weather does. The seasons themselves are the oldest teachers of this. Winter can feel, while we are buried in it, like the only truth there has ever been, the bare branches and the frozen ground stretching on without end. But that ground is not dead. It is resting. Beneath the hard surface, the spring is already preparing itself in its own time, with no need of our worrying. We have watched the turn happen 1,000 times, and still, each winter, some part of us forgets. To remember it, even faintly, is to carry a little warmth through the cold months. The people in our lives keep changing too, and so do we. The friend we have known for decades is not the same person we first met, and neither are we. Sometimes that is a loss, and sometimes a relief, but it is always happening, quietly, beneath the names that stay the same. To love someone across a long life is to keep meeting them anew, again and again, as the river of who they are goes on flowing. The same holds for our own moods and seasons. The sadness that feels permanent tonight will soften with time. The worry that fills the entire sky just now will look far smaller a month from here. And even our joys, which we would happily keep forever if we could, are passing through as well, and knowing this need not spoil them. It can make us hold them with more tenderness while they are with us. There is a phrase from the Japanese tea tradition, ichigo ichie, which means something close to one time, one meeting. It is a reminder that this gathering, this cup of tea, this particular afternoon, with these particular people, will never come again, exactly as it is now. Far from being a sad thought, it is the very thing that makes a moment shine. Because it will not return, it is worthy of our whole presence while it lasts. There is nothing here to turn into a hard discipline. It is enough, now and then, to remember the simple truth of it. When something good is happening, to let yourself feel it all the way, knowing it is a welcome visitor rather than a permanent resident, and to be grateful for the visit. And when something painful sits heavy on you, to recall, even faintly, that it too is on its way through. That it is moving already, even now, the way the water moved past the fisherman's hand. In any ordinary day, there are countless small reminders of this, for anyone who cares to notice them. The light shifting across a wall, a song that builds and then ends, a meal that is wonderful and then finished, a mood that arrives with the morning and has slipped away by afternoon. None of it stays, and this is not a flaw in the world to be corrected. It is simply the nature of things, the same nature that brings the next light, the next song, the next meal, the next mood, in an endless arriving and departing that has been turning since long before us. This is not a way of holding feelings at arm's length. It is a way of holding all of them more kindly, the sweet and the bitter alike, knowing each one belongs to a current that never stops flowing, and that we do not have to clutch at any of it to keep ourselves whole. Let us pause for a moment now. Let whatever is here be on its way, as all things are. Whenever you are ready, we will continue. There is a restlessness that follows many of us through the day. A faint sense that something is missing, that the next thing will finally settle us. We reach for it, and for a moment, we feel better. Then the feeling fades, and the reaching begins again. The world is full of things designed to catch that wanting, In the old marketplaces, sellers called out from every stall, promising that this cloth, this trinket, this taste would be the one to satisfy. Today the voices are louder still, following us through every screen and street, each one whispering the same message. You are not yet complete. One more thing will do it. The Buddha looked very closely at this restlessness, and he gave it a name. He called it a kind of thirst, a wanting that can never quite be filled, because being filled was never really its aim. It wants only to go on wanting. He taught that this thirst is the deep root of our unease, the place where most of our suffering begins. We can feel the truth of this if we look back honestly at the things we were once sure would finally make us happy. The position we longed for, the possession we saved for, the pleasure we could not stop thinking about. We reached them, one by one, and each time the satisfaction was real but brief. Within days or weeks the glow had faded, and the mind, restless again, had already fixed on something new, just beyond our grasp. It was not that any of those things were worthless. It was that none of them could ever be the last thing, because the wanting itself always outlives the getting. It is important to be clear about what he meant, because it is easily misunderstood. He was not saying that pleasure is bad, or that we should enjoy nothing. He himself had tried that path, punishing his body with harsh denial, and he found it just as much a trap as chasing pleasure had been. He pointed instead to a middle way. The trouble is never the pleasant thing itself. The trouble is the grasping, the moment we clutch at a pleasure as though our whole peace depended on holding it, when it was always going to slip through our fingers in the end. There was once a lord who had everything a person could want, and could not understand why he was not happy. He lived in a fine house, ate the richest food, and slept on the softest bed in the region. Yet he lay awake most nights, restless and dissatisfied, certain that some final thing was still missing, if only he could name it. What troubled him most was his gardener. The gardener owned almost nothing. He worked long days in the sun, ate plain bread, and slept in a small hut at the edge of the grounds. And yet the man sang while he worked. He laughed easily. At night, the Lord could see a soft light in the hut and hear the gardener humming, perfectly at ease, before falling into the deep sleep of a contented man. It drove the Lord to distraction. How could a man with nothing be so happy, while he, with everything, was so hollow? At last he called for his wisest adviser and asked him to explain it. The old adviser smiled. It is simple, my lord. Your gardener is happy because he has not yet joined the company of the 99. The company of the 99? What is that? Allow me to show you, rather than tell you. Tonight, leave a purse containing exactly 99 gold coins at the gardener's door. Then watch what happens. That night, they did exactly as the adviser said. In the morning, the gardener opened his door and found the purse. He could hardly believe it. He carried it inside, spilled the coins across his table, and began to count them, his hands trembling with delight. 91, 95, 99, 99. He counted again, and a third time. Surely there had been a mistake. Surely a gift so generous was meant to be a full 100. Where was the last coin? He searched the floor on his hands and knees. He shook out the empty purse. He looked along the path outside, certain the 100th coin had been dropped somewhere. It was nowhere to be found. From that morning on, the gardener was a changed man. He had 99 gold coins, more than he had ever owned in his life, and all he could think about was the one that was missing. He began to work longer hours, skipping his meals, so that he might earn that final coin and at last have a round and perfect 100. He no longer sang. He no longer hummed in the evenings. The soft light in his hut now burned late into the night while he sat counting and worrying, and his sleep, when it came, was thin and troubled. The Lord watched all of this from his window, astonished. "I do not understand," he said to the advisor. He was content with nothing and miserable with almost a fortune. Why? Because, my Lord, the moment a person tastes almost enough and catches sight of a little more just beyond their reach, contentment slips away. They will torment themselves, chasing the small piece that is missing, no matter how much they already hold. The advisor looked at him kindly. "Your gardener has joined the company of the 99. He has plenty and feels poor. Forgive me for saying it, but it is the same company you have belonged to your whole life. That is why all your riches have never once let you sleep." The Lord was quiet for a long time. He had always thought of himself as a man who had everything, and his gardener as a man who had nothing. For the first time, he saw it was the other way around. The thirst the Buddha described works in just this way. It is not satisfied by getting what it wants. Getting only moves the wanting one step further down the road. We tell ourselves that this next thing will be the one that completes us, and when we have it, the feeling of completeness lasts a breath or two, and then a new lack appears on the horizon, and off we go again. There is an old line in the Dhammapada, that collection of the Buddha's sayings, that puts the cure simply. Contentment, it says, is the greatest wealth. Not the most gold, not the finest house. The simple sufficiency of a person who looks at their life and finds, for this moment, that it is enough. The Taoist teacher Lao Tzu pointed at the same thing when he wrote that the one who knows they have enough is truly rich. A person can own a great deal and remain poor, forever grasping, and a person can own very little and be wealthy beyond measure because they have stopped reaching. This is not a teaching about giving everything away. It is about where we place the weight of our happiness. When we hang it on getting the next thing, we will always be one thing short. When we can rest in what is already here, the ground stops shifting under our feet. There is also a tale of a man who returned home after a long pilgrimage on foot. For many weeks he had walked simple roads, slept on the hard ground beneath the stars, and eaten whatever plain food was offered to him along the way. He had expected the journey to be a hardship to endure. Instead, somewhere in all that simplicity, he had found an unexpected peace. With so little to manage and so little to want, his mind had grown calm and clear, steady as still air. When he finally came home to his comfortable house, he expected to feel only relief. There was his soft bed, his rich food, his many fine things. And yet, to his confusion, the peace he had carried for weeks began to drain away within days. The soft bed felt too soft, and he lay awake in it, restless. The rich food sat heavy where the simple bread had not. Small things began to bother him that had never troubled him on the road. A draught from a window, a meal served late, a cushion that was not quite right. He found himself irritated and unsettled in the middle of all his comforts after weeks of deep contentment with nothing at all. His brother came to visit and found him pacing. "I do not understand you," his brother said. "On the road you had nothing, and you write to me that you were at peace. Now you are home with every comfort a man could ask for, and you seem more troubled than ever. What is the matter with you?" The man sat down slowly, and as he tried to answer, he understood it himself for the first time. "On the road," he said, "I wanted almost nothing, so there was almost nothing to disturb me. I had only the next step, the open sky, a little food. My peace did not depend on much, so very little could shake it." He looked around at his crowded, comfortable rooms. "Here, I have surrounded myself with so many comforts that I have come to lean on every one of them. And the more I lean on them, the more easily I am toppled when the smallest one is missing. All this softness has slowly made me fragile. I have far more than I did on the road, and somehow far less peace." He did not give away his house, or his bed, or his good food. But from that day he held them more loosely. He kept a little of the road with him, a little of the simplicity that had taught him how little he truly needed in order to be well. Both men, the gardener and the traveler, ran into the same trap, and so do all of us, in our own ways. We imagine that more comfort and more pleasure will bring us more peace. Often they bring the opposite. The more our happiness depends on things being just so, the more easily the world can unsettle us, because the world is never just so for very long. This is the strange cost of a very comfortable life, and it creeps up on us unnoticed. Each comfort we add becomes one more thing that must be present for us to feel at ease, and so one more thing whose absence can disturb us. The person who needs the room a certain temperature, the pillow a certain softness, the meal at a certain hour, has built a peace with 100 conditions attached to it. The person who can be content with less leaves fewer places where the world can reach in and unsettle them. There is a strength in simplicity that has nothing to do with hardship and everything to do with freedom. This is not a call to harden ourselves or to refuse the good things of life. A warm meal, a soft place to rest, a moment of beauty, these are gifts, and there is no virtue in scorning them. Equanimity does not mean enjoying nothing. It means enjoying things freely, fully, while they are here, without handing them the keys to our peace. We can savor a pleasure and still be steady when it passes. We can rest in comfort without growing so soft that every small lack throws us. The Buddha's middle way points exactly here, to a path that runs between two cliffs. On one side is the endless chase after pleasure, which wears us out and never delivers what it promises. On the other is a grim, joyless denial that treats every comfort as an enemy. Neither extreme brings peace. The way between them is to meet the good things of life with open hands, to enjoy the warm meal, the soft bed, the beautiful evening, fully and gratefully, and then to let them go when they pass, without clutching and without pushing away. That openness, neither grasping nor refusing, is where a steady happiness lives. The freedom, in the end, is the freedom of enough, of being able to look at this ordinary moment, with whatever it happens to hold, and feel the reaching settle, and think, for now, this will do. This is plenty. There is nothing here that needs to be forced or renounced. It is enough, now and then, simply to notice the pull of more as it arises, to feel the small tug toward the next thing, the next taste, the next purchase, and to recognize it for the restless thirst it is, rather than mistaking it for a true need. And it can help, just as easily, to notice what is already here. the warmth of a drink in the hands, a roof overhead, a body that is, in this moment, at rest. So much of contentment is not getting something new at all. It is turning, for a moment, to see the simple sufficiency that was already sitting in the room with us, waiting only to be noticed. Much of what we spend our lives reaching for, we already hold, in some humble form, right now. Not the grand version we picture perhaps, but enough. A little warmth, a little rest, a little beauty, a little company. When the reaching settles even for a moment, these small sufficiencies step forward, and we find that the fullness we were chasing somewhere off in the distance had been here beneath our feet all along. Let us stay here a moment, with nothing to chase and nothing to add. For now, this is enough. When you are ready, we will go on. How quickly we decide that we know. Someone speaks to us sharply, or pushes ahead of us on a crowded path, or fails to return a friendly greeting, and in a single instant, we have the whole story. They are rude. They are selfish. They think themselves better than us. We have judged an entire person from one small moment, and we are usually quite certain we have judged correctly. But we almost never have the full picture. We see a sliver of someone's day, a few seconds of their behavior, and from that thin slice, we build a confident verdict about who they are. The mind does not like a gap, so it fills the gap with a story, and the story it reaches for is rarely a kind one. We assume the worst, and then we feel the worst, and we carry the sting of it around for hours, all on the strength of a guess. If we are honest, this happens many times a day, in small ways and large. A friend does not reply, and we decide they are cooling toward us, when in truth, their day simply swallowed them whole. A stranger frowns in our direction, and we are sure it was aimed at us when they were lost in some worry of their own that we will never know about. We are forever writing the inner lives of other people, casting ourselves as the reason for their moods, and we rarely stop to ask whether the story we have written is anywhere close to true. It turns out that one of the deepest sources of a steady mind is something very simple: understanding. In the Buddhist tradition, the steadiest equanimity of all is said to be the kind that grows from wisdom, from actually seeing how things are, rather than the kind we hold in place by force or willpower. When we truly see why a thing happened, the heat so often goes out of our reaction. What looked like an insult becomes something else entirely once we know the story behind it. There is a story of a woman who kept a small tea house at the edge of a busy town. She loved her work. She knew most of her customers by name, and she took quiet pride in the warmth of her little place, where travelers could rest and feel cared for. One grey morning, a man came in whom she had never seen before. He was abrupt from the moment he entered. He snapped at her when she asked what he would like. He complained that the tea was too hot, then that it was too weak. When she tried to make polite conversation, he cut her off. He paid, left nothing in thanks, and walked out without a word. The woman was wounded. All that day she turned the encounter over in her mind. What a cold, unpleasant man, she thought. What gives a person the right to treat a stranger so harshly? She had done nothing but offer him kindness, and he had thrown it back in her face. The hurt of it followed her through every cup she poured, souring an otherwise good day. Some weeks later, the man returned. The woman braced herself. But this time he was different. He sat quietly, and when she brought his tea, he looked up at her with tired eyes. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I came in here some weeks ago, and I was unforgivably rude to you. I have thought about it since, and I wanted to come back and say so." She was so surprised she could only nod. "That morning," he went on, "was one of the hardest of my life. Everything I had built had just fallen apart. I had not slept. I had nowhere to go and no idea what would become of me, and I walked into your tea house with all of that storming inside me. You were nothing but kind, and I had no kindness left in me to give back. It was never about you or your tea. I am sorry you caught the worst of a very bad day." The woman sat down across from him, and something shifted in her chest. For weeks she had carried the image of a cruel and hateful man. And here, all along, had been a frightened person at the lowest point of his life, doing his poor best to get through a single morning. The story she had built was not the true story at all. "There is nothing to forgive," she said gently. "I only wish I had known. I would have given you a second cup and let you sit as long as you needed." Almost every harsh word we receive is like that man's. We meet the sharp edge of it, the rudeness, the impatience, the unkindness, and we never see the storm behind it. We do not know about the sleepless night, the private grief, the fear the person carries that has nothing to do with us. We catch the splash and assume we were the target, when very often we simply happen to be standing nearby when someone could no longer hold their pain inside. This is why understanding loosens anger so completely. The Buddha taught that when we see clearly into why people act as they do, much of our reactivity simply falls away. Behind cruelty, there is almost always some wound. Behind coldness, often some fear. None of this excuses the behavior, and it does not mean we must accept poor treatment. But it changes what we feel. The mind that understands has far less to be angry about, because it sees that most of what comes at us was never really aimed at us at all. We could call this the difference between the surface and the source. On the surface is the sharp word, the slammed door, the cold reply. That is all we usually see, and so that is what we react to. But every surface has a source beneath it. The Buddha taught that nothing in this world arises on its own, without causes, that whatever we meet is the near end of a long chain of conditions stretching back out of sight, most of which have nothing to do with us. A sharp word is never only a sharp word. It is the visible tip of a hidden history. We do not need to know the whole of it. We only need to remember that it is there, that no one is simply unkind for no reason, and that the reason, if we could see it, would very likely soften us. And there is a humility in this too. If we have ever, on our own worst day, been short with someone who did not deserve it, then we already know the truth of it from the inside. We were not monsters that day. We were simply overwhelmed, and it spilled out onto whoever happened to be nearest. The stranger who is curt with us deserves the same understanding we would want for ourselves on a day like that. Most of the time, of course, no one comes back to explain. The tea house woman was fortunate. She learned the truth behind that hard morning, but we usually do not. The sharp stranger vanishes back into the crowd, and we never find out what they were carrying. And this is the heart of it. We do not actually need the explanation in order to offer the understanding. We can assume the hidden burden is there, because it almost always is, and let our reactions soften on that assumption alone, with no proof at all. To give a person the benefit of the doubt, even someone we will never see again, costs us nothing, and returns us a great deal of peace. 2 travelers once came upon a shield hanging from a post where 2 roads crossed. It was a fine shield, left there long ago by some old order of guardians, and the 2 travelers stopped to admire it. The first stood on one side and said, "What a magnificent shield! I have never seen such a beautiful silver." The second traveler, standing on the other side, laughed. "Silver? Your eyes are failing you, friend. This shield is gold, plainly gold, the finest I have ever seen." Silver, gold. Back and forth they went, each more certain than the last, each beginning to wonder how the other could be so stubborn, or so foolish, or so determined to argue. Their voices rose. What had begun as a pleasant moment between 2 travelers was turning sour, and each was ready to ride off convinced the other was a liar. Just then an old woman came walking up the road, and seeing the 2 of them red-faced and quarreling, she asked what the trouble was. "Tell this fool the shield is silver," said the first. "Tell this one it is gold," said the second. The old woman looked at the shield, and then at the 2 men, and a small smile crossed her face. "Why don't you each walk around," she said, "and stand for a moment where the other is standing?" Grumbling, they did. The first traveler walked around to the far side, and his mouth fell open. From here, the shield was unmistakably gold. The second traveler, now standing where the first had been, found himself looking at the clearest silver he had ever seen. The shield, it turned out, was silver on one face and gold on the other. Each man had been looking at a different side. Each had described exactly what was in front of him, honestly and accurately. And each had been completely certain that the other must be wrong, when in truth they had simply been standing in different places. They looked at each other and began to laugh, a little embarrassed, and they walked on together as friends. We spend a great deal of our lives like those 2 travelers, each of us standing in our own spot, describing the side of the shield we can see, and feeling sure that anyone who sees it differently must be mistaken. The Buddha himself once told of people who each laid hold of one part of a thing and then quarreled endlessly, each insisting that their small piece was the whole. None of them were lying. None of them had the entire truth either. This does not mean nothing is real, or that every view is as good as every other. It means only that our own view, however clear and certain it feels, is almost always partial. We are seeing one face of the shield. There is usually another face we cannot see from where we happen to be standing. What makes this so hard to remember is that being certain feels exactly the same whether we are right or wrong. The first traveler did not feel as though he were guessing. He could see the silver with his own eyes. His certainty was complete, and it was also only half the truth. Our own certainties feel just as solid, and that very solidness is what closes us off. We stop wondering. We stop asking. We decide we have seen all there is to see, and we plant our feet. The Zen teacher, Shunryu Suzuki, put the cure beautifully. In the beginner's mind, he said, there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind, there are few. The beginner, who does not yet know, stays open and curious, ready to be surprised. The expert, sure they already understand, has stopped looking altogether. To keep a little of that beginner's openness, even about things we feel we know well, is to keep the door propped open, so that more of the truth can keep walking in. This is worth remembering most of all with the people closest to us, the ones we are surest we have figured out. In most disagreements between people who care for each other, both are describing something real. One sees the silver, the other the gold, and each grows more frustrated that the other cannot see what seems so plain. Yet the heat usually drains away the moment either one is willing to walk around and stand, just for a breath, where the other has been standing. Not to surrender what they see, but to add to it the half they had been missing all along. None of this needs to become a heavy effort. It is simply a small turn of the mind, available to us whenever we notice our certainty hardening. When someone acts in a way that stings, there is a single question we can ask before the verdict comes down. What might I not be seeing here? Perhaps there is a sleepless night behind this, a sorrow I know nothing about. Perhaps I am looking at only one face of the shield. That single question changes a great deal. It opens a small space between what happens and how we respond, and in that space, compassion has room to grow where anger might have been. We do not have to work it out completely or excuse anything. We only have to stay curious a moment longer, to remember that the person in front of us is, like us, carrying a whole life we cannot see. These two ways of seeing, understanding the storm behind a person's behavior and remembering that our own view is only one side of the shield, are really the same wisdom wearing two faces. The Vietnamese Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh taught that understanding is the very root of love, that we cannot truly love what we have not first understood, and that to understand another person deeply is already to have begun to love them. That is what this kind of seeing slowly does to us. It turns our judgments into compassion, almost without our noticing. Both faces come from the same humble admission that we do not have the whole picture, and we never quite do. Strangely, that admission does not leave us anxious or unsure of ourselves. It leaves us lighter. There is far less to defend when we are no longer pretending to see everything, and far less to rage against when we accept that most of what we meet has depths we cannot reach. From that wider view, the world slowly stops feeling like something constantly done to us and begins to look like what it truly is. A great crowd of people, each one seeing their own side of things, each one carrying burdens we know nothing about, each one doing their best to manage a life that is every bit as complicated and tender as our own. It is hard to stay angry at a world seen that way. It is much easier to meet it with patience, and even, here and there, with a kind of tenderness. Let us soften here for a little while. Let your certainties loosen, and your thoughts rest light and open. When you are ready, we will go on together. Now and then we meet a person who stays calm while everything around them is coming apart. Bad news arrives, plans collapse, voices rise, and somehow they remain steady, clear, almost unhurried. It is easy to assume this is simply a gift, a lucky trait they were born with, as though some people come into the world with steadier nerves than the rest of us. But that kind of steadiness is almost never a thing of the moment. It rests on something built long before the hard moment arrived, laid down across many ordinary days. The calm we admire in a crisis is the visible part of a foundation that was poured out of sight over years. The hard moment only reveals the foundation. It does not create it. When we watch someone keep their head while everything around them tips over, we are seeing the surface of years of building we had no way to witness, all of it suddenly made visible by the very pressure that would have toppled someone unprepared. There is more to equanimity, then, than a state we manage to summon when trouble comes. It is also a ground we stand on, and that ground is built in the days when nothing much is happening at all. The Buddhist tradition speaks of several supports that make a steady mind possible. Among the deepest are a clear conscience, a settled trust, and a mind made steady through long familiarity with itself. When the winds finally come, these are what hold. The first of them is the simplest, and the one we most often overlook. It is integrity, living in a way we do not have to hide. The Buddha spoke of a particular kind of happiness that he called the happiness of blamelessness, the ease of a person who has done no harm and so has nothing to fear from being seen. When our actions are clean, there is no division running through us, no buried dread of being found out, nothing we must keep in the shadows. And a mind with nothing to hide can rest in a way that a divided mind never can. There is a story of a cloth merchant who was known throughout his town for the honesty of his scales. For many years he had sold his cloth at a fair price and an honest measure, never once shortening a length or hiding a flaw. He was not the richest merchant in the market, because he would not cheat to get ahead, but he was trusted, and he slept well. One day, a powerful and wealthy trader came to his stall. He had a private proposal. He wished to sell a great quantity of poor, thin cloth to a buyer from a distant city, and he needed someone of good reputation to certify it as the finest grade. "Stamp your honest name on it," the trader said, "and the buyer will never question it. Your word is worth a great deal here. I will make you richer than you have ever dreamed." The merchant listened, and then he shook his head. "My name is worth a great deal here, precisely because I have never once put it on a lie," he said. "I will not begin now." The trader's face darkened. "You are a fool. Do you know who I am? I could make things very difficult for you." And he swept out of the stall, leaving the threat hanging in the air. The merchant felt the weight of it. The trader was powerful, and powerful men can do harm. But he went home and ate his supper and slept soundly because he had done nothing wrong. In the weeks that followed, a rumor began to move through the market, whispered from stall to stall. The honest cloth merchant, it was said, was not so honest after all. His scales were rigged. His measures were short. His fine reputation was a mask. The trader, it seemed, had decided on his revenge. At last, the rumor grew loud enough that the market officials came to investigate. They arrived at the merchant's stall one morning, stern and official, ready to examine his scales and search his stock for the cheating everyone was now whispering about. Another man might have panicked. Another man might have stammered, or grown defensive, or tried to talk his way out. But the merchant simply greeted them warmly and stepped aside. "Please," he said, "examine everything. Here are my scales. Weigh them against your own. Here is every bolt of cloth I sell. Measure any of them, all of them, against what I have promised. Open every chest. I will hold the lamp for you." The officials set to work, fully expecting to find the rigged scale, the short measure, the hidden flaw. They weighed and measured and searched for a long while, and they found nothing. Every scale was true. Every length was honest. Every piece of cloth was exactly what the merchant said it was. What struck them most, as they worked, was the merchant himself. He was not nervous. He was not sweating or pleading. He stood there calm and even cheerful, watching them turn his whole stall inside out, because he knew with complete certainty that there was nothing for them to find. His ease was so genuine that it told them more than any inspection could. The officials left with apologies. The rumor, having nothing to feed on, withered away. And the merchant went back to his cloth, untroubled, the same man after the storm as he had been before it. The merchant's calm did not come from clever words or strong nerves. It came from the simple fact that his life matched his name. There was no gap between what he showed the world and what he actually was, and so there was nothing in him for fear to grab hold of. This is the strength a clear conscience gives. The person carrying some hidden wrong lives, with a low and constant unease, a background dread of the day it might come to light, and any inspection, any hard question, any unexpected knock at the door sends a jolt of fear through them. But the person who has done right has no such fault line waiting to crack. They can be looked at closely, questioned, even accused, and remain steady, because the truth is on their side and they know it. It is the most ordinary of foundations, built not in grand gestures but in countless small choices. The honest word when a lie would have been easier. The fair measure when no one was watching. None of these feel like much in the moment. But together, over time, they pour a floor beneath us that does not shift when the ground is tested. The peace of integrity is not a reward handed to us from outside. It is simply how an honest life feels from the inside. None of this asks us to be flawless. Everyone has acted in ways they are not proud of, and a clear conscience is not the same as a spotless record. What weighs on a person is rarely the simple fact of having erred. It is the wrongs left tangled and unfaced, the things still hidden, the amends never made. When we own what we have done and set right what can still be set right, even an old wrong begins to loosen its hold, and the ground beneath us grows solid again. The aim is not to have never stumbled. It is to be living, now, in a way we do not have to hide. There once lived, along a windy stretch of coast, a farmer who could never keep a hired hand for long. The work was hard, and the strong weather that blew in off the sea put most workers off. So when a calm, plain-spoken man came looking for the job, the farmer was relieved, though the man's answer to his only question was a strange one. "Are you a good worker?" The farmer asked. "I can sleep when the wind blows," the man replied. The farmer did not understand what that had to do with anything, but he was short of help, and he hired him on the spot. The man turned out to be a fine worker, steady and tireless, busy from dawn to dusk every single day, whether or not anyone was watching. Then one night, long after they had gone to bed, a strong wind came in off the sea. The farmer woke to the sound of it moving against the roof, and he felt the old worry stir in him. He went to the hired man's room and woke him. "Wake up, please. The wind is rising, and there is work to do before it comes in. We should see to the animals and the hay." The man barely stirred. He rolled over and said, calmly, "No, sir. I told you when I came. I can sleep when the wind blows." And he went back to sleep. The farmer sighed, half exasperated, and stepped outside on his own, lantern in hand, expecting to find a good deal of trouble waiting. But what he found stopped him where he stood. The haystacks were already lashed down tight and covered against the rain. The animals were all safe in the barn, fed and calm. The shutters were fastened. The tools were stowed. The gates were secured. Every single thing that could have come loose had already been made fast, days or weeks before, in the fine weather, by a man who did his work faithfully when the skies were clear. There was nothing left for the farmer to do. He stood a moment in the breezy dark then went back inside and lay down, and at last understood. The man could sleep through the storm because he had done all his work before it arrived. He had nothing left to be concerned about from the wind. We cannot build a foundation in the middle of an earthquake. The time to lay it is in the calm, ordinary days, long before we need it. This is true of the steady mind as well. A mind that has spent time with itself, that has grown a little familiar with its own workings in easy moments, is a mind that can stay collected when the hard moments come. We do not develop calm by waiting for a crisis and then trying to summon it from nothing. We develop it slowly, in small ways, when little is at stake, so that it is already there, already ours, on the day the wind begins to blow. There is a reason those who know the mind well speak so much of practice in calm times. It is not that calm times are when we most need steadiness. It is that they are when steadiness is easiest to build. To begin learning how to settle the mind only in the middle of a crisis is like trying to learn to swim after the boat has already gone over. The skill has to be there beforehand, worn smooth by quiet repetition, so that when the water rushes in, the body simply knows what to do. The Buddha pointed his students toward exactly this kind of inner ground. Be islands unto yourselves, he told them. Make of yourself a refuge, a place of safety within, that no flood from the outside can wash away. He was speaking of building something so steady inside us that we are never entirely at the mercy of what happens around us. The world will always have its storms. But a person who has tended their own integrity, their own trust, their own steadiness, carries a shelter with them wherever they go. Part of what we build in those steady days is a kind of trust. Not blind belief, but the settled confidence that grows out of experience. Each time we meet a difficulty and discover that we can bear it, that we come through, that the worst feeling passes and we are still standing, a little more trust is laid down in us. Over the years it deepens into a quiet assurance, the felt knowledge that we have weathered hard things before and can weather them again. A person with that trust does not come undone at the first sign of trouble, because some part of them already knows how these things tend to end. There is a deep confidence that grows from all of this, and it has nothing to do with arrogance. It is not the loud certainty of a person who thinks they cannot fail. It is the quiet assurance of a person standing on solid ground, who knows that whatever comes, they have done the work, and the floor beneath them will hold. None of this is built in a single grand effort. It is built in the small choices of ordinary days, the way a coastline is shaped by countless ordinary tides. The honest answer in a small matter. A few unhurried minutes spent settling the mind when nothing is wrong. A promise kept when breaking it would have cost nothing visible. Each one seems too small to matter, and each one is another handful of stone in a foundation we may not need today, but will be deeply glad of when the weather turns. The steadiness we practice in calm moments works the same way. A few unhurried breaths here, a moment of settling there, none of it dramatic, none of it urgent. It can feel almost pointless to grow calm when we are already calm. But that is precisely when the foundation is laid. The ease we visit in untroubled hours becomes the ease that visits us in troubled ones, already familiar, already known, like a path we have walked so many times we could find it in the dark. And there is no need to wait for some great test to begin. The ground is laid right now in how we are living this very ordinary day, in the easy hours when the skies are clear and nothing at all seems to be at stake. Let us come to rest here, on whatever ground we have built. When you are ready, we will go on together. Something happens to a person who meets the heat of life with balance, year after year. The steadiness in them slowly grows finer. It stops being merely an absence of upset and becomes something with a glow to it, a warmth that others can feel the moment they come near. We have all met someone like this, usually someone who has lived a while and weathered a great deal. There is a brightness about them, an ease, and being in the room with them settles something in us. It is a hard quality to name. They are not necessarily the cleverest people we know, or the most accomplished, and often they have lived quite simply. But there is an unhurried clarity to them, a sense that they are at home in themselves and at home in the world, that nothing needs to be rushed or grasped or defended. Difficulties seem to move through them without leaving the usual wreckage behind. And just by being near them, we find ourselves borrowing a little of that ease. This brightness is not a thing they were handed. It is what equanimity becomes once it has been refined, once it has passed through enough of life's fire and come out clearer on the other side. The Buddha had a favorite image for this slow refining, and it came from the workshop of the goldsmith. Raw gold, as it comes from the earth, is not the gleaming thing we picture. It is mixed through with dross and grit and other metals, dull and brittle and useless for fine work. To become pure, bright, and workable, it has to pass through the fire and through the patient hands of someone who knows exactly how to work it. There is a story of an old goldsmith who took on a young apprentice, eager and impatient to learn. The apprentice wanted, more than anything, to make beautiful things at once. So he was frustrated by his first lessons, which seemed to him to be all waiting and watching. The master would place the rough gold in the crucible, set it in the heart of the fire, and then tend it with the most careful attention, blowing on the flames to raise the heat, then easing off, sprinkling a little water, pausing to peer closely at the metal, then returning it to the fire. Why so slow? The apprentice burst out one day. If we want it hot, let us make it hotter. Build the fire as high as it will go and be done with it. The master smiled and shook his head. Try it then, and see. So the apprentice took a piece of gold, thrust it into the crucible, and blew on the fire with all his might, piling it higher and higher, never letting up. He was sure he would finish in half the time. But when he pulled the gold out at last, it was ruined, scorched and spoiled, good for nothing. You blew too hard and never stopped, the master said gently. Pure heat with no rest will burn the gold away. But the opposite is no better. He took another piece and handed the apprentice a ladle of water. Here, keep it cool instead. Sprinkle it whenever it grows warm. The apprentice did, and of course the gold never melted at all, never released its impurities, and stayed as dull and mixed as it had begun. Too much water, and nothing changes, said the master. And if you only stand and stare at it without ever applying the fire, it will sit in the crucible forever and never come to anything. He set to work again himself, and the apprentice watched more closely now. The art is in the balance. Heat when heat is needed. Rest when rest is needed. A close look from time to time, but not a nervous, constant fussing. You bring all three, each at its right moment, and you do not lean too hard on any one of them. And under the master's balanced hands, the apprentice saw the change finally come. the dross rose to the surface and was drawn away. The gold went from dull to molten to clear, and at last it lay there, gleaming, pure and bright, soft enough now to be shaped into anything at all. "There," said the master. "Now it is ready. Now it can become a ring, a chain, a crown, whatever is asked of it." The fire did not destroy it. The fire set it free. The Buddha used this very image to describe what happens to a mind over a life of practice. The heat is the difficulty we all meet, the losses and frustrations and sorrows that come to everyone. We tend to think of these as nothing but damage, things to be avoided at all costs. But met in the right way, they are also what refines us. The hard experiences burn away our pettiness, our illusions, the rough edges of our reactions, the way the fire draws the dross up out of the gold. The key, as the goldsmith knew, is balance. The same heat that refines can also scorch, if we meet it with too much force, grinding ourselves down, pushing too hard. And we can also go slack, drowning every difficulty in distraction and comfort so that it never has the chance to teach us anything. Equanimity itself is the goldsmith's balanced hand. It lets the fire of an experience do its slow work without either flinching away from it or being consumed by it. Pressure when pressure serves, rest when rest serves, a clear and steady attention that neither panics nor looks away. Most of us know both ways of getting it wrong. We know what it is to meet a hard time with too much heat, lying awake, raking over it, fighting it, forcing ourselves toward a strength we do not yet feel until we are scorched and exhausted and no wiser than before. And we know the other failure too, the long retreat into distraction, numbing each difficulty the moment it arises so that it never quite touches us and so never changes us either. Between the two lies the goldsmith's way, which neither flees the heat nor hurls itself into the flames, but stays near, steady and watchful, and lets the fire do the slow work that it alone can do. And what emerges, over time, is a mind like the refined gold. Pliable, no longer brittle, bright, able to meet whatever comes and respond to it freely, taking the shape the moment calls for, rather than cracking under it. A refined mind is not a hardened one. It is a soft and workable one, strong precisely because it has stopped being rigid. We see the difference clearly in how different people meet the same blow. One person, brittle, shatters or hardens, lashing out or shutting down, because they have only one way to respond and the blow does not fit it. Another, refined, gives where they need to give and holds where they need to hold, absorbing the shock and remaining whole. It is not that the second person feels less. Often they feel more and more clearly. But what they feel moves through them and is met, rather than cracking them along some hidden seam. That suppleness, the ability to bend without breaking, is one of the surest signs of a mind that has been through the fire and come out refined. The Buddha said something about this brightness that goes a step further. He taught that the mind is, by its own nature, already luminous, already radiant. The troubles that cloud it are visitors, dust that settles on a surface that was bright to begin with. By this understanding, all the refining work is not a matter of manufacturing some light we lack. It is a matter of letting the dust settle and clear, so that a radiance which was always there can shine through again. This puts the whole of the work in a kinder light. We are not trying to become something foreign to us, hammering an unnatural calm into a restless mind. We are uncovering something that was ours from the very beginning. The peace we reach for is not waiting at the end of some long road. It is here already, underneath the noise, like the sun still shining above the clouds on the greyest day, not gone, only hidden, waiting for the sky to clear. An old teacher once lived at the edge of a village, and people would come to him when their hearts were troubled. A young man arrived one day in a great state of agitation, his mind racing, his worries tumbling over one another. He had come expecting the teacher to give him some powerful instruction, some secret to fix everything at once. Instead, the old man simply welcomed him in, poured them each a cup of tea, and sat with him. They did not speak of anything in particular. The teacher asked about the young man's journey, about the weather on the road, about nothing of any weight. And as they sat together in the still room, something began to happen that the young man could not explain. His racing thoughts began to slow. The knot in his chest began to loosen. Without a single piece of advice being offered, his agitation drained away, and a deep calm settled over him, as though it was seeping into him from the very air of the room. After a long while, he said, "I do not understand. You have told me nothing, taught me nothing, and yet I feel more at peace than I have in months. How are you doing this?" The old teacher laughed softly. "I am not doing anything," he said. "I am only sitting here with you. What you are feeling is not something I am giving you. It is something that is catching, the way a yawn is catching, or the way one calm person in a frightened crowd can quiet everyone around them." "But where does it come from?" the young man asked. "From a long life," the teacher said, "of letting the fire burn away everything in me that was not peace. I did not build this calm. I only stopped feeding the things that disturbed it, year after year, until what was left was this. There is nothing here you do not already have. Yours is simply covered over just now. Sit a while longer, and you will feel your own rise up to meet mine." This is the gift a refined mind offers the world, almost without trying. A person who has grown truly steady becomes a kind of shelter for others. Their calm is contagious. It spreads into a tense room and softens it. It gives frightened people something solid to stand near. They do not have to say the right thing or do anything clever at all. The steadiness itself does the work, simply by being present. Most of us have felt this from the other side, on some day when we were coming apart and someone simply stayed steady with us. They may not even remember it. They did nothing they would think of as important, but their refusal to be pulled into our panic, their plain and grounded presence, turned out to be worth more than any advice. It reminded us, without a single word, that steadiness was still possible, that the storm could be survived, because here was someone standing calmly in the middle of it. To become that for another person is one of the great quiet kindnesses a refined life makes possible. Agitation, of course, spreads just as easily. One anxious person can set a whole room on edge, each nervous glance feeding the next. The refined mind works that same contagion in reverse. It lowers the temperature simply by holding steady, and the people nearby, hardly knowing why, begin to settle toward it. A calm presence gives everyone around it a kind of permission to set down their own alarm. And it asks nothing of us that is not already within reach. The refining is not reserved for saints or sages. The very heat we are in right now, whatever difficulty we happen to be carrying, is itself the fire. We do not have to go searching for hardship to be refined by, nor flee from the hardship we already have. We need only meet it with a little more of the goldsmith's balance, a little less flinching, a little less forcing, a steady and patient attention that trusts the slow work to do what it does. The gold cannot see its own refining while it sits in the fire. From the inside, the heat is only heat. The brightness is clear only afterward. So it tends to be with us. In the middle of a hard passage, it rarely feels like growth. It feels like difficulty, plain and unwelcome. The change it works in us usually shows only later, looking back, when we notice that something which would once have overturned us now barely rocks us at all. We do not have to feel ourselves becoming clearer in order to be clearing. We only have to keep meeting the heat with a little more steadiness than we met it with before. What emerges cannot be rushed, any more than the apprentice could rush the gold. But it comes. The brightness that was always there, beneath the dust and the dross, begins to show. And one day, without our ever deciding to become so, we find that we have grown a little clearer, a little warmer, a little more able to hold steady in the heat, and to be, for the people around us, the calm presence we once needed someone else to be. Let us be still together for a little while, with nothing to refine and nothing to fix. When you are ready, we will go on. All along, this path has been pointing somewhere. We began by seeing that a settled heart is not a flat or distant thing, but a living balance, warm and awake. From there we followed it through the winds of praise and blame, through the habit of taking things to heart, through love and loss, through the pull of wanting and the heat of judgment, through the foundations that steady us and the slow fire that refines us. Each of these has been a step in one direction, toward a single place. And that place is freedom. This is what a settled heart finally opens into. Not freedom from a life that touches us, but freedom within it. The free heart is not the one that nothing reaches. It is the one that is no longer thrown by what reaches it. The winds still blow. Loss still comes, and so does delight. But they no longer own us, no longer pick us up and set us down at their pleasure. We can feel everything, fully, and still remain ourselves through it all. And this freedom is the very opposite of coldness. It is not a wall we build to keep life out. It is a great openness, soft and spacious, that can let the whole of life in without being overturned by any of it. It is the most alive thing there is, and the most at ease. So much of a life can be spent being moved around by things outside our control. A shift in the weather of someone's mood, and our whole day tilts with it. A word of praise lifts us up, and a word of criticism sets us down. We are carried this way and that, rarely resting anywhere for long, at the mercy of whatever happens to arrive at the door. The freedom we are speaking of is the slow loosening of all that. Not so that life stops moving us, for a free heart feels everything, but so that it moves us less violently, and we find our balance again sooner. And underneath all the movement there comes to be a stillness that simply holds. There is an instruction the Buddha once gave to a young student, the two of them sitting together near the bank of a river. He told the young one to make his mind like the earth. People throw upon the earth all manner of things, he said. They scatter sweet flowers on it, and they cast bitter refuse on it. They pour clean water and dirty water alike upon the ground, and the earth receives all of it, the lovely and the unlovely, without recoiling from any of it, without reaching after any of it, without being troubled in the least. The earth is simply too vast and too settled to be disturbed by whatever happens to fall upon it. Make your mind like that, he told the young student. Practice being like the earth. Then the pleasant and the unpleasant may both fall upon you, and you will remain at peace, because there is nothing in you small enough to be overturned by them. The earth does not have to push the unpleasant away, or grasp at the pleasant to keep it. It does not have to do anything at all. Its steadiness comes simply from how vast and settled it is. Whatever lands on it is received into something so much larger than itself that it cannot disturb the whole. A spoonful of salt stirred into a small cup of water turns the whole cup bitter and undrinkable. The very same spoonful poured into a wide, clear lake changes almost nothing, and the water stays sweet. The salt has not changed. What has changed is the size of what receives it. So much of our distress comes from living as that small cup, where every grain of difficulty alters the taste of everything. A single unkind remark colors the whole day. One worry fills the entire sky. There is so little room in us that whatever arrives takes up all the space at once. The slow work of a lifetime is to grow more like the lake, more like the earth, until we are so wide and so settled inside that the things which fall into us, sweet or bitter, are simply received and held, without changing who we are or stealing our peace. This is not something we force into being. It grows on its own, a little at a time, as we keep meeting our days with a touch more openness and a touch less grasping. The spaciousness deepens almost without our noticing, until one day we find that something which would once have spoiled everything now lands in us and settles, and the water stays clear. And this is not the earth growing numb. The earth does not stop receiving. It takes in all of it, the rain and the seed and the fallen leaf, the footstep and the river and the long shadow of evening. Its peace is not the peace of feeling nothing. It is the peace of being wide enough to hold everything it feels. That is the steadiness worth growing toward, not a smaller heart that lets less of life in, but a larger one that can take in more and more of it and still not be overturned. There is a story of a river that ran a long way across the land. It began as a bright stream high in the mountains, and as it flowed down through the valleys, it grew strong and wide and sure of itself. It knew how to be a river. It knew how to carve through rock, how to rush over falls, how to wind across the plains. For its whole long journey, it had always known exactly what it was. But one day, it came to the edge of a great desert of sand, and there, its waters began to vanish. As fast as it flowed forward, the sand drank it up, and the river could not cross. It tried again and again, throwing itself at the sand, and each time it only soaked away to nothing. The river grew frightened. This was the end, it thought. After so long a journey, it would simply disappear here and be lost. Then a voice came, carried on the wind that moved over the dunes. "The wind crosses the desert," it whispered, "and so can the river. But when I throw myself at the sand, I only vanish," said the river. "You cannot cross as you are now," said the wind. "Hurling yourself forward, you will only be swallowed up or turn into a marsh. You must let the wind carry you across." "But how?" asked the river. "How can I do that and still be myself?" "You cannot do it and still be exactly as you are now," the wind answered gently. "What you truly are can never be lost. But the shape you are clinging to, that must be released. Let yourself rise. Let yourself be carried. and you will fall again as rain on the far side, and gather and become a river once more, freer and wider than before. The river was afraid. It had been a river for so long. To let go of being a river felt like ceasing to exist altogether. But it was tired of throwing itself at the sand, and at last it grew still and let the warm air lift it, softly, until it rose up and was carried, weightless, over the great desert and came down again gently on the other side. And the river found that the voice had told it true. It had not been lost at all. By letting go of the one narrow shape it had clung to so tightly, it had been set free to become something wider and more alive than it had ever been before. This is the heart of the freedom the whole path has been leading toward. So much of what binds us is our grip on a single narrow shape, a fixed idea of how things must be, who we must be, what we cannot bear to lose. We throw ourselves against the sand over and over, certain that holding on is the only way to keep from disappearing. And all the while, the freedom we long for lies on the other side of letting go. Every river, in the end, is making its way to the sea. And the ocean receives them all. Clear streams and muddy ones, great rivers and small, the ocean takes in every one and remains the ocean, vast and unhurried, never overflowing, never troubled by what flows into it. Storms may ruffle its surface, but far below, its depths stay calm and still, untouched by any wind. The Buddha once said that, just as the great ocean has but a single taste, the taste of salt, all of his teaching had but a single taste as well, and that taste was freedom. Everything we have explored together, every story and every reflection, has carried that one flavor running through it. The freedom of a heart no longer owned by what happens to it. The freedom to meet a whole life, all of it, with open hands. The river feared that letting go would mean the end of it. What it found, instead, was the beginning of something far larger. And so it is with the grip we keep on our own small shapes. We hold so tightly, certain that the holding is what keeps us safe and whole. Yet, it is the holding itself that keeps us narrow, that wears us out as we hurl ourselves at the sand. The moment we loosen it, even a little, something in us widens, and we discover we were never as fragile as our gripping had led us to believe. None of this has to be reached all at once. We do not become the earth or the ocean in a single night. Freedom comes to us in small tastes long before it comes to stay. A moment when a sharp word lands and somehow does not wound. A moment when a disappointment arrives and we meet it with a steadiness that surprises us. A moment when we wanted something badly and felt the wanting loosen its hold and were at ease whether it came or not. Each of these is a taste of the same wide freedom, given to us early, like a promise of what is slowly growing. We need not wait until we are perfectly free to treasure these moments. They are real freedom, every one of them, even when they last only a breath, before the old habits drift back in. And each time we taste a little of that ease, it grows a touch more familiar, a touch easier to find our way back to. Little by little, the moments lengthen. The freedom that visits us now and then slowly becomes the freedom we live in. We lean toward it gently, and it deepens on its own. There is nothing to force and nothing to seize. The spaciousness we have been speaking of is not somewhere far away, waiting to be earned. It is our own nature, the ground we have been standing on all along, only covered over now and then by passing weather. And the weather always clears. Everything we have walked through together has been a way of clearing that weather. loosening the hold of praise and blame, easing the habit of taking things to heart, softening our grip on the people we love and on the passing moments we wish would stay, meeting our wanting and our quick judgments and our hardest days with a little more room and a little less struggle. None of it was ever about becoming cold or distant or shut away from life. It was about becoming free, free to love without clinging, to lose without breaking, to meet the whole of a life with a heart wide open and unafraid. So there is nothing to do now but rest. Nothing to hold, nothing to fix, nothing to chase. Whatever has happened today, whatever you are carrying, you can let it be received into something far larger and far more settled than the troubles themselves. Wide as the earth that takes in all things and remains unshaken. Deep as the ocean that receives every river and is never overrun. You can let yourself grow that spacious now. You can let everything you have been holding simply rest upon you, the sweet and the bitter alike, and feel how little it disturbs the great calm underneath. There is room in you for all of it. There always was. For now, there is nowhere else to be and nothing else to become. You have carried enough today. You can set it all down here, into this wide and settled ground, and let it be held for you. The earth never tires of holding what rests upon it. The ocean never wearies of receiving the rivers. And the deep calm in you does not tire of holding you either, exactly as you are, just as you are, this evening. Notice, if you wish, how the body is already doing this. It asks nothing of you to be held. The bed or the chair beneath you carries your weight without effort. The floor carries them both. The earth carries the floor. On and on. Everything resting upon something larger and steadier than itself, all the way down. You are already held, completely. You do not have to do a single thing to earn it. You can let your weight go now and be carried. Let us be still together now, with nothing left to do. Let the whole of the day settle and grow quiet and come to rest, like still water at the close of evening. And so we come to the end of our time together tonight. We have wandered through a great deal, from the winds that push us this way and that, all the way to the freedom of a heart as wide as the earth and as deep as the ocean. There is nothing you need to hold on to from any of it. Whatever was true in these words is already a part of you now, and it will be there, softly, whenever you need it, whether or not you remember a single thing by morning. Even the sleep you are drifting toward now is, in its own way, the very thing we have been practicing all along. No one has ever fallen asleep by force. The harder we try to make it come, the further off it drifts. Sleep arrives only when we stop reaching for it, when we loosen our hold on the day and let ourselves be carried. Every night, without ever once calling it practice, you lay down everything you were holding, every worry and plan and half-finished thought, and you trust yourself to the dark. You let go of control completely, and only then does rest come to meet you. This is the whole of what we have explored these past hours, made simple and brought close to the body. Peace was never found by tightening our hold on life. It comes as we soften it. The night asks of you the very thing a steady heart asks, to stop holding on so tightly and to trust that you will be held. You will not wake tomorrow suddenly free of every worry, untouched by every hard word. That is not how any of this works, and it was never the point. A steady heart is not a place we reach once and then keep forever. It is a direction we lean toward, a little at a time, across the whole long course of a life. Tomorrow there will be moments that tip you off balance, as there are for every living person. And there will be other moments, perhaps only one or two, when you catch yourself meeting something hard with a little more room than you once had, recovering a touch sooner, holding on a little less. Those small moments are not steps on the way to some distant mastery. Each one is already the thing itself, whole and complete. There is nothing in you that needs perfecting, and nowhere you are meant to have arrived by now. Beneath the busy surface of any day, there is a stillness in you that all the noise never truly reaches. It was there this morning, under the rush of things. It is here now, beneath these words. It does not have to be built, or earned, or deserved. It is simply what remains when the grasping settles and the striving lays itself down, which is just what is happening in you now, as you rest. The thoughts and worries that filled your day were never the whole of you. They were passing weather, here and then gone. You are not the weather. You are the wide and open stillness that all of it moves through, and that stillness is left untouched by any of it. To rest, truly, is to settle back down into that openness, and to feel, without any effort at all, that it has been your home the whole time. And when the morning comes, none of this is something you will have to leave behind on the pillow. It travels with you into the plainest corners of an ordinary day, into the moment someone speaks more sharply than they meant to, into the small letdown, the long wait, the plan that comes apart in your hands. You will not always meet these things with grace, and that is no failure at all. But here and there, underneath the first flicker of reaction, you will feel a steadier ground beneath your feet, and the simple choice to rest there instead. That is where all of this truly lives. Not in some calm retreat far away from the world, but in the middle of an ordinary, unremarkable life, in how you meet the very next moment, and then the one after that. The steadiness was never separate from the living of your days. It was always the living itself. And as that steadiness grows in you, it slowly becomes a gift to the people around you as well. A heart that is harder to shake is a heart with more room in it for others, more patience to listen, more warmth to give. You do not have to manufacture any of this. It happens on its own. A heart at ease makes room for everyone near it, without ever once trying to. The calm you build for yourself was never only for yourself. It spills over into every life that passes close to yours. So let it all go. There is nothing left to think about, nothing to solve, nothing to carry into the night. The day is behind you now, and it asks nothing more of you. You have done enough. You are enough, just as you are, resting here in this moment. Let the day itself begin to dissolve. All of it, the things that went well and the things that did not, the conversations, the small worries, the tasks left unfinished. None of it needs your attention now. You can set the whole of it down, the way you might lay a heavy bag beside the door at the end of a long walk, and feel how good it is to simply be free of the weight of it. Tomorrow will keep. For these last few moments, there is nothing to manage and no one you need to be. Let your breath grow slow and easy, with no effort behind it at all. There is no need to deepen it or change it in any way. Only let each breath out be a little softer than the one before, and with every one, let yourself settle a little further into rest, a little lower, a little heavier, more and more at ease. The body knows how to do this. It has only been waiting for you to give it permission. Thoughts may still drift through, and that is perfectly all right. You do not have to chase after them, and you do not have to push them away. Let them come and let them go, passing through and out again, like slow clouds crossing a wide night sky. You can simply watch them pass, with no interest in following any of them, until little by little they grow fewer and farther apart, and the spaces between them open into something soft and wide and still. Feel the room around you, holding the warmth and the dark. There is nothing out there in the night that needs you tonight. The darkness is not something to keep watch against. It is a kind and soft thing, drawing a curtain over the day, making a still place for you to rest. You can let it settle over you like a blanket, soft and close and safe. If there is any holding left anywhere in the body, you can let it loosen now. The small tightness gathered in the shoulders, the jaw, the brow, the hands. None of it is needed any longer tonight. One by one, you can let each of these places soften and release, the way a hand that has been clenched all day finally opens and rests. There is nothing left to brace against, nothing to be ready for. You can let the bed take your full weight and give it over gladly, holding back nothing at all. And as you drift, let even these words begin to fade into the background until there is only the stillness and the dark and the deep ease of having nowhere to be and nothing to do. Whatever steadiness you have touched tonight is yours to keep. It will still be here in the morning, waiting softly, ready to meet the new day alongside you. But none of that is for now. Now is only for rest. May you carry a little more steadiness into the days ahead and meet whatever comes with a kinder and a wider heart. May your sleep tonight be deep and unhurried, and may you wake, when you wake, feeling rested and held and ready. Rest now. You are safe. You are enough. There is nothing left to do, nowhere left to go, no part of this moment that asks anything of you at all. There is only the soft dark and your slow and easy breath and the long, gradual descent into sleep. You can let yourself go all the way down into it now, with nothing to hold you back. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at Midnight Monk.